everyone. How's everyone going tonight? Is everyone having a good time? I hope so. All the speakers have been excellent. So I'm Tessa, and tonight I'm going to be telling you a little bit about some cute and cuddly Tasmanian species. Yes, that's right, it is the beetles. And don't believe me that beetles can be cute and cuddly? Well, check this out. Check out these antennae on this beetle. Check out these really cute little toes. What about this cute long beetle rostrum? Or the metallic coloration on this beetle? Isn't that cute? I find that extremely cute. Now, like maybe some people in the audience, I love a good hug. And imagine how much better it would be being able to hug someone that has an extra 4 legs. That'd be so good. So, as you can see, I love some unusual organisms, like beetles. And this is something that my friends and housemates often have to live with. So one time, I convinced my housemates that they should let us bring a huntsman spider between one house to our next share house with us when we moved. I managed to convince them to do this because they thought it was kind of creepy, because by telling them that we could save so much money by having a 5th housemate. And the spider ended up being a real great companion for me when I was doing the first start of my PhD. He did hang out, and hey, he had a great enthusiasm for insects too, by the sounds. So when my family and friends ask me, oh, what are you doing on your PhD on beetles again? I say that I work on the conservation of Australian animals, that I spend a lot of the time in the lab, and that the beetles that I study aren't called John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And I admit, I've had a few moments of being guilty of being a screaming fan after finding something that has been particularly interesting or unique or cool. Now, beetle mania went evolutionarily wild in the animal kingdom, with 1 out of every 4 animal species being a beetle. That's quite a lot. And I have 4 family members in my family: my mum, my dad, my sister, and me. So statistically, 1 out of 4, one of us must be a beetle. And like, for the life of me, I can't work out who it is. Like, it's gotta be my sister, right? Like, I always thought there was something weird about her, something different. So beetles are the Swiss Army knives of the ecosystem. There's a beetle that does everything. And they do things like they eat poo, they eat leaves, they eat other animals, they disturb cruises by having really large mating orgies on board and ruining it for some tourists. And yet, despite the fact that they're so biodiverse and that they have all these really important ecosystem roles, we still don't know that much about a lot of species, which is quite unfortunate. And considering that we don't know that much about some species, it's quite problematic when we're trying to address some problems that might be occurring to species, such as having impacts from climate change with changed fire regimes. So, most people don't interact with beetles on a regular basis. Beetles are the hide-and-seek champions. They're really small, they have coloration that blends into the background, and they have very specialized environments that people might not go to. And in my project, I'm looking at basically where different species live. I started my project in 2020, which was a great year to start a PhD project, and decided to focus on beetles that lived in Tasmania. I mean, honestly, I couldn't go anywhere else in that time, but who needs to go to the tropics anyway, right? I wanted to stay in Tasmania the whole time. So in my project, I drove around the wonderfully wet and rainy forests of Tasmanian wet and rainforests, collecting beetles. And I collected them from the leaf litter that lived on the forest floor. I collected what I call as assemblages, which is kind of like everyone at a party occurring at the same time, all the interesting characters. And I went to 70 sites around Tasmania. I used a method called litter sifting, which kind of looks a bit like you're putting leaf litter into a wok. It's a kind of wokking action. And since completing my fieldwork, my cooking skills with the wok have suddenly improved quite significantly. So when I get the leaf litter back to the lab, I put it through what is called a Beetles funnel, which uses the power of heat and light to make the beetles move themselves down into a preserving liquid like ethanol. It's a bit like people who are pale-skinned having to run away from the sun in order to stop themselves being sunburned. Here's an experiment I did on myself. And speaking of burning, when I was doing my lab work, I accidentally started a fire in the lab by having a globe that was too hot. And everyone in the whole building had to get evacuated. Some of you are here tonight. And you could say that this scientific light bulb moment was so hot that it started the fire alarms. So when we got the beetles, some of them had never been described before by Western scientists. So it was important to keep them and preserve them for future scientific research. With this information, we can look at where different species live, mapping out different future ranges for these species. We can also sample DNA from them, which we use to describe new species, which is all very exciting. The standard way of preserving beetles is by pinning them. So it's putting a pin through the beetle's back and onto some paper. And because they have an exoskeleton, they can dry out quite nicely and preserve all their important features. I really like beetles, and it is, in a way, really sad that in order to study some species, I do have to kill them, which is very sad. And I have this one friend, when I've been doing my PhD, that said that he thought I was a necromancer because I was killing so many animals. That must be the only reason, right? And then instead of doing something altruistic like bringing back the thylacine or something, that instead he thought I was planning to make some kind of sweet beetle army to take over the world. So, actually, if you're a dead log or a plant or a pile of poo or someone who enjoys cruises, maybe you should watch out. Watch out. So, what did I find? I collected over 600 species of beetles. This is a selection up here. They're all very pretty and small. A lot of them were singletons, so they were species that only occurred in one place on the map. So beetles really love the value of good real estate. And a lot of them were quite small, not surprisingly. Many of them were, most of them were less than a few millimeters long, which is pretty small. And I worked out that on average, there was 95 beetles per meter square in all of our, on average, in all of our wet forests and rainforests in Tasmania, which is quite a lot. But maybe if you think about, maybe all the Tasmanian beetles want to, say, have a seat and sit down and watch some AFL, maybe watch the grass grow in the AFL. If we wanted to think of that scenario, to get all those beetles sitting down watching a game of footy, you would be required, on the scope of Tasmania, to build over 65 million stadiums to fit them all in, which is definitely quite a lot. I don't even have that much land. But also, 65 million stadiums, not in my backyard. So the information we can get from this helps us be able to determine where good places are that we can protect different species in the future. We can also learn a lot about our cute, huggable, diverse, small, little, weird guys that make Tasmania home. And that's all been for me tonight. If you didn't enjoy my beetle jokes, don't worry, they'll bug you long after you leave.